Morning, morning.
Welcome back to the morning show on Tobago Updates Television. I am Adanna Combie, and we begin conversations this morning. We speak with Mr. Allan Stewart. He's the director of TEMA, Tobago Emergency Management Agency, and we're speaking about the oil spill recovery and where we are 4 months after the spill. Good morning and welcome.
Yes, good morning and good morning all of Tobago. It's good to be here, and I think it's my responsibility to report what's happening in regards to the oil spill, and the process is going quite well.
Right. And, as I mentioned, it's been 4 months. I was just sitting here thinking that it happened in February and we're 4 months after. And of course, we're still talking about it. Even yesterday, we had conversations. And, sometimes it takes some time. The recovery is going to take some time. In as much as we have been able to collect most of the debris, there's still things that are happening in the space as it relates to that. So we want to know where we are now in terms of logistics, in terms of, I don't know what aspects and what point we are in terms of, are we in a good place? Could we have been in a better place? And how much more work do we have to do to be in the best place possible at this point in time?
It requires a process, and the process, according to the plan, is well on its way. First of all, it required an immediate response, which, based on the availability of the resources and the logistics of moving those resources, there was a response plan. But the whole continuum, as it relates to disaster management, constantly speaks to preparedness, prevention, mitigation, response, and also recovery. Recovery happens to be a period in a disaster or an emergency that is very lengthy. And it requires careful processes, getting back life to order. And the population at large look forward to that period when you could say things are back to normal. However, this event itself, as it relates to responsibilities, can be divided into two divisions of labor. One whereby the Tobago House of Assembly undertook the responsibility to work along with its partners and those who came forward during the process in terms of the response to deal with shoreline cleanup. Various contractors were involved in that, and I could say that we have successfully completed that process where the cleanup of the beaches are concerned. Now, is it completed? Yes, it is completed, but can there be a revisit of oil on our beaches? Yes, it can, and for various reasons. The experts or persons who would have gone that way before, I think, very early, less than 21 days into this event itself, we were visited by Petrobras, who had a similar experience of a ghost ship, and they indicated to us very clearly, they were able to tell us projected cost, projected time. We asked we were very diligent in the questioning, and they would have pointed out that you can have oil showing up on your beaches up to 6 to 8 months. We felt very proud of ourselves based on the response mechanism that we had thrown into it, a very steady work rate, numbers of bodies. Sometimes the numbers went up to over 300 per day, spanning the 15 kilometers of space. And therefore, a lot of work went into it. But one of the things that they remind us, and ITUF, which is the international body for tankers and federation, they go around the world making sure that you do things according to the books. They're like the police. And they police the exercise, ensuring that you're not wasting time, you're not wasting resources, you're not also misusing resources, and the applications as it relates to contractors are well within the industry best practice. So that went well, and also, but I want to make the point that they did remind us when we asked about, well, what this thing could look like. They said 6 to 8 months based on their experience. And when we were about 3 months or so, we know that we had it under control. However, where there is another division of labor which speaks to the vessel itself out at sea and the work that is constantly being supervised by the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. Probably it may be fitting for me to say that the tier level must be reminded that we are at a tier 2 level whereby the government of Trinidad and Tobago has a very clear responsibility in all of this, according to the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan. And that is backed up by the Tobago Oil Spill Contingency Plan. They are the Bible where this event is concerned. And they have a responsibility, they undertook that responsibility to ensure that the de-inventory, pay attention to the word, de-inventory means that you are taking out the hydrocarbon from the vessel. And we would have spoken about cove being applied as a staging area where you do the extraction of the hydrocarbon from the vessel itself, and you move it into frac tanks. These tanks hold up to 21,000 gallons of fluid. And that we saw that process where the inventory process move it from the frac tanks, which are coved, and take it to the Scott Mulchon, which is still packed at the port of Scarborough. And that is the process of moving the hydrocarbon from one place to another. You do what you call depositation, where you deposit it into the vessel itself, and then the vessel is on its journey to Trinidad. I think it will have made one trip already, and it's back here and it's taking in another situation. Now, what happens out at the Gulf Stream is that where the Gulf Stream is perched, where it's run aground, it's a very tricky area in that it is resting on a coral bedrock. And what you have happening is a phenomenon that they call hydrostatic, that every now and again when you have rough seas, very rough seas, you have air trapped in the hull of the vessel. You have naturally oil is actually floating on the water within the vessel or within the tanks because it's capsized upside down. And that process is sometimes very, very challenging as it relates to rough seas. So when there is rough seas, it's a no work because it becomes very dangerous for occupational health and safety purpose of the workers. So yes, they would have engaged one of the finest bodies of people utilizing modern technology. We learned about the NOFI system, which was an application that is still available and is used for if there is spillage, that it swoops up the spillage that is on the surface of the water. For it to operate in that manner, the booms that were around the vessel, we had to remove it for them to carry out their work around the vessel itself. I indicated that there are two conditions. One I spoke about, which is if there's rough seas, and if there is heavy rainfall, it interferes with the process as well of because what you're trying to de-inventory is not necessarily water waste or liquid waste. It's the hydrocarbon they are trying to extract from the vessel, and that process continue. I think, according to my figures here, 30,000 barrels have been the inventory is up to.
And how often is this process done as we sit here today? How is it done on a daily basis, and how long does it take to get it done? I mean, considering all the other elements you spoke about, the rough seas and the rainfall, how often is it the extraction done, and how long can it take in terms of...
It's a daily process, but each day have its own merit. So they look at weather charts, they look at tidal conditions. For example, on the 11th, we learned on the 11th, sometime last week, we would have learned that, I think that was last week, Tuesday, we would have learned late into the evening that we saw videos of, or reports of that fisher folks would have seen a large amount of released into the ocean. And things like that. During that period were the rough seas period, so no one was there when that occurred. So as I talk about the hydrostatic movement of the vessel as a result of, you could have these releases taking place. It don't happen very often, but it can happen based on the movement of the vessel, the behavior of the rough seas and things like that. But it's a daily operations that the TNT salvage on the teak. And so also they have a subsidiary company that is working along them that provides like a task force that utilizes the no fee as well to mop up or respond if there is any emergency. The Tobago House of Assembly have a committee, that oversight committee. That committee assigned by the Tobago House of Assembly. During that process, we were asked that we need to produce what you may consider a plan, a contingency plan, in the event that you have a release, what we are going to do. So that plan is in place. It allows for a quick response if there is a situation that warrants responding to. So we have our ducks lined up. We hope everything can go according to plan. We are asking the Tobago public to exercise patience with the process, because it's a very dangerous operations where these persons, if you look at a ship, it's the angles of the body of the ship is not a flat surface. It has a ridge in the middle, and then it's sloped on both sides. So then over a period of time, you mentioned we are up to, well, I know we are up to day 133, and therefore, that being said, you will have things like algae or moss growing on the ship itself. It makes it very, very dangerous during certain times for them to operate on that ship.
And just quite recently, I think it was last week or the week before, there was a sighting of some of the same substance in the water.
Last week
in the same cove area. What is the position with that now? What is happening there? Is that from the same, of course, the same vessel? And how have we been able to contain and control that area as well, where that is concerned?
Yeah, the response to that is that is where the no-fee system comes in. However, the trajectory of the vessel, of the releases itself into the ocean, is no threat to land. Our major concern is that we always had concerns about the hydrocarbon affecting the beaches on the Caribbean side. However, as it went out of the Caribbean Sea, it journeyed around sometime last week, Saturday, I think it was around Friday thereabout, we were told we received word that a Caribbean flight would have seen oil-like substances, and this was confirmed by satellite imagery up to beyond 5 miles to the west of Tobago. There are reports that it would have entered into the southern part of the Grenada water, or their zone. So their territorial waters. Is it a threat to land-based Grenada? The answer is no. Based on the current patterns and based on the trajectory, there is no fear that it will affect the landmass of Grenada or the beaches of Grenada. However, it was positioned, sheens were seen, and satellite imagery were able to confirm that it would have reached in their territorial waters, and that takes it a little north of Venezuela, south of Grenada, things like that. And that is where the no-fee system comes in. They will be able to soup it up according to the tidal conditions and things like that.
Okay, because of course, as I mentioned in the conversation earlier, we kind of still going through the trauma of the very initial spill, and so to hear that it was a little bit concerning, but your explanation now kind of brings some clarity to that. And it moving in that direction brings me to ask now, if it is heading that way, the initial spill took place in Tobago, and we have the responsibility to take care of our beaches, our land spaces, and our resources, our natural resources. Wondering now, as it is traveling in that area, how, in terms of the responsibility to contain it, it brings you to ask questions. Is it that they didn't contain it properly in the Tobago space? Why is it traveling in this direction? And, so those questions will come up. And so I'm wondering if there's a response to that, or how do we treat with something of that nature?
Well, there are international relations. I am part of what you call the ESSI, the Energy Sector Security Initiative, and I know many years ago, more than 12 years ago, there were arrangements as a result of how do you treat with your borders, how do you treat with a threat to another neighboring country. So there are relationships between the member states of CARICOM as to how they will treat with that. That is one of the concerns that the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, will look into if there is a threat. But in your territorial waters, the quantities that have been released is insignificant in the sense that you have what you call, as it disperses, you have a situation where weathering, so you may, while the satellite imagery may pick up how much of it is sheen, how much of it is what you may call the viscosity of it in terms of the dark oil. Yeah, so you want to look at it in a particular way. There is also the factor of weathering. Sometimes weathering meaning that it's beaten by the elements, the sunlight, things like that. So while you may be able to visibly see the presence of hydrocarbon or oil-like substance, it is one that, is it really, is it an imminent threat? It is, no, it's not in terms of how the trajectory and how it's behaving. But as I must make the case that the Ministry of Energy has the responsibility, and they're doing all that they can. They have employed the necessary tools. They are on standby in the event of releases such as that to take care of it out at sea. So we expect that based on the planning. I think last Friday we would have had an emergency meeting that was chaired by the Chief Secretary himself, and he wanted to get a sense of what exactly, I admire his courage. I admire the way in which he approaches these things, very frontal. And he called all the players together in the space, the IMA, the EMA, TEMA, the Department of Natural Resources, Fisheries. Everyone came around, the Coast Guard. And based on the intelligence coming out of that briefing, we were quite confident, based on information even provided by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, that the trajectory would have fallen westward, which to his concern, it wasn't threatening Tobago itself, and therefore that went well, and we continue to work towards the process of the inventorying through the Ministry of Energy and TNT Salvage.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Stewart, for bringing us up to speed, and of course, bringing us up to speed with terminologies as well, so we could understand the process of de-inventory of the substance that is currently in the water. And I'm happy to know that it's a daily effort that is taking place there, and that everything is kind of under control based on what you're saying, and that you're in a good
not
place.
Every day is fishing day, so you have a situation where sometimes they will not go out based on the weather. Today, I feel I'm hearing rain there, but we're expecting some weather coming in. But the seas are in immaculate conditions for carrying out that job in terms of the seas flat. But it's that sea, when it's like that, when the Atlantic Ocean is that flat, we know at TEMA that there's weather coming, so we expect some rainfall later on that is coming up from the southeast of Trinidad, and therefore that weather may pause the operations, because they are trying to prevent rainwater, seawater from getting down inside of the tanks themselves.
I understand quite fully. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We've been speaking with Mr. Allan Stewart, Director of TEMA, Tobago Emergency Management Agency, as he brings the update in terms of the recovery of the oil spill that took place here on the shores of Tobago on February 7th, I believe, of this year. And of course, while life is back to normal for the average man, we are able to enjoy a certain level of normalcy. The work is still ongoing as the recovery process takes place here in Tobago. So they're still working hard at it. And eventually we will get another update to see where we are. Thank you so much, Mr. Stewart. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us even up until this point. But we have to go for a short break before we continue conversations this morning. And as we go for that break, we invite you to help us. Share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back.